Hi guys, so this week we are doing Unit 3. What I would like you to do is to have with you through this video slash PowerPoint presentation is your study guide, and you go to Unit 3, which should be on page 18. Okay. One of the things I'd like you just to notice before we actually get into the discussion this week is that if you look at your study guide, each of the units will have been written by a specific individual. When you are referencing your study guide, because it's one of your sources, one of your primary sources, you should reference it. You will be using the author of the unit that you are dealing with as the individual you reference. Okay, so the editor, the individual who's compiled the study guide, that is not the individual you will look at. It is the individual whose name is on whose name is in the unit. Okay, so now that that's out the way, we're looking at persuasive texts. Okay. That means that you're going to be looking at works of non-fiction prose texts. These are texts about real people, about real places, about real issues, and about real events. Now, these can be structured, contextualized, formulated into a number of different types of texts. Okay, depending on what the author is trying to tell you. Okay, or what someone is trying to sell you. Okay, persuasive texts are very much about obviously persuading. That's the point of a persuasive text. Okay, they're there to manipulate us into buying into something, being informed with a particular point of view, being persuaded, being asked to buy something. They're trying to sell something. Now, you will see every day there is always something that will be sold to you, okay, as you're driving to work, or if you're catching a bus or a train or a taxi. You will find, just going to work, there will be one of 100 different ways people try to sell you something. On the lamp poles on the streets and on the main thoroughfare streets, you will see newspaper headlines. Those newspaper headlines are trying to catch our attention. Why? Not to, at the moment, read the news, but to buy the newspaper that the news is coming from. Okay. You see perhaps a billboard which is selling Coca-Cola. Okay, it's asking you to buy into Coca-Cola, and the way it does that is it does that through certain ideologies that it hopes identifies with the consumer. A good example for that is even just the Coca-Cola bottles, which Coca-Cola are now using as forms of advertising in and of itself, where we have on the little strip of plastic which is wrapped around the bottle, you will have, I don't know what's on it now, but at some point last year they had names, and the idea was collect the names of your friends and collect a Coke can or a Coke bottle with your name on it. And people did. People went out and looked for a Coke bottle or a Coke can which had their name on it. Okay. that is itself a form of marketing. Okay, so you will find that the manipulation that we talk about in persuasive texts can, but mostly is not a malevolent type of manipulation. It's not there to be ugly or to be nasty or to control you
persuasive
in
tone.
some form of
When someone is
manner
trying to
or
sell
way.
you something, think
Although
about
there
the
are
adverts that you see on
number
TV
of
every day.
debates
The
about
characters who
the
are presented
ideology
in
behind
front
the
of you
notion of choice,
are
how much choice
colourful, they're
does a consumer
likeable,
have.
there's usually some humour attached
when
to the
we have
advert.
been brought up in a society
The characters themselves
which has
speak
sold us
fast and they're
items
energetic
on
and they're
such a
full
regular
of emotion
basis
and interest,
that
and they try to grab your
we
attention.
instinctively
Why?
are
Its tone,
loyal to a
its
product
style,
without
its
even being
diction,
aware of
because
it. So, for
if
example,
they
if
look
you have
interested,
grown
if they
up
sound interested in the product,
and
it
your
makes
parents
us
used
as
perhaps
the audience be a little bit more
a
interested
certain
in that
brand of
product,
shampoo, maybe
we may
you perhaps
buy it.
may,
If you have an advert which is
use
dull
that
and
same
boring,
shampoo,
your
not
attention is
intentionally,
not going
but
to be
it's
grabbed. And if
because
your
you've
attention
always
is not
used
grabbed,
it. You may shop at the same shops that your parents
you're not going
shopped at
to
for
even be
the only
aware of
reason
what the advert
because
is about.
you've always done
and
it.
then you probably
Okay,
won't.
so
go
that
out
idea
and
of
buy
choice is problematic in a
the
world
product.
where we
Okay, so it's
can be
not what you said,
conformed
it's
and
how you said it.
informed
Okay.
from a very
Now,
young age.
within the persuasive
So the
texts,
idea
if
of
we
manipulation
quickly
that
just
we're
skims through
trying to look at
Unit
here is
3, you'll find
how are
that we
texts
look
being
at news
presented
reports, okay,
that try and associate themselves with the reader
and then we look at
target
advertisements,
certain readers and then try to convince them to buy
and
into,
then
and you're not
speeches.
only buying into a product. So
Okay.
perhaps
So those are the three main
we
ones. I will
as,
add
uh,
into this
university
magazine
students,
article,
just
because
a lot of us we work
it's
all day.
you
then
can
we have to come
link it
home,
under
we've got to feed kids. We've got
news
to
reports.
help them
It
with
has the
homework.
same
We need to
style and
feed our cats
structure,
and our dogs and
but
our rabbits and
I like to
our
put it as a
budgies and our
separate
fish. We need to do
persuasive text
household
because
chores,
it can
and
also
only once
be
we've done
an
all of
advert.
that after a very
It
long
can be
day of work,
a sort of a merge
can
between
we
the
sit
news
down
report
and actually
and
do
the
any
advert,
of
because
our
sometimes you'll
own
find that
studies.
magazine articles
Okay.
are
So
in trying to inform you, they try to
a
sell
market
something.
is
Okay,
is
but
available
sell
for
a consumer product.
energy drinks
Okay.
and
So,
when you are
energy
effervescent
texts
tablets
or
and stuff
when
like
you're
that, and they say
looking
buy
at
into us,
your
we'll give you
assignments, your
just that
exam
extra
questions,
bit of energy
what
that
you need to
need
look at
in the evening
terms
so
of
that you
tone.
can do what you need to do. And
hey, you've got an exam
is the
tomorrow,
argument
don't you need
logical and
you
rational?
know, the
Okay.
energy drink just to get you through
has
that
the
24
author
hours of no
proceeded
sleep?
from a
So
it's
sort of
asking us to buy into the idea of
this
first
is a
that
needs to be B leads to C,
energy
C leads
drink
to, B,
to sort of get us
D,
through the next 24 hours.
so that we can
Logical,
do what
rational.
needs to be
There's
done.
no,
but it's also
emotional
buying into the
impact
ideology that
or
the
student
emotion
is
of the text has
extremely
been
busy
greatly
and
reduced.
there is not a lot of time. So
is
it's
it
like
neutral and
going to
objective,
help you get that extra
which
bit of
means
time.
that
Okay, so
they have not
that's the kind of
tried
manipulation
to
that we're
sway
talking about.
you in any
When
which
we
way.
look
Perhaps
at
they
these,
present
and you'll
two
find that
arguments.
also in news
So in a
articles,
newspaper
there
article,
will be a
perhaps
certain
on
level
strike,
of manipulation.
are they only
Okay,
looking
so
at the individuals who are striking?
there's always an ideology. We will
Okay,
get to the
or
notion
they're
of
looking
ideology.
at
You need to become
the,
familiar with it.
for those of
Are
you
they
who have
interviewing
expressed
both the
concerns about
strikers
critical
and
reading,
the company
ideology
that
plays a large role.
the workers are
in,
striking against
being a
Okay,
critical reader,
so
because when we
which
are able
side
to
of
identify
the
certain ideologies which are
story
punted,
is being reported
onto
on.
us,
Okay.
then we can
If
start
it's
to
both,
be a little bit more
it's
critical
neutral
and
because
objective.
we
If
understand
the
what is
writer has
behind
thought
the
of
message,
two sides,
what
or
are people
he is
trying to sell us.
he is providing a
In
counter argument
terms of
to
his
his argument,
ideals
it is
and
neutral and
ideas.
objective. If it's just
And-
one-sided, it's
yeah,
biased.
okay,
How
and
we
when
can
it's
go
biased,
about
it's usually
agreeing
not
or
neutral
disagreeing. If we
and
can't
not
identify
objective.
those ideas,
Okay, it would
then
probably
how
be
can we be
passionate
critical?
and emotional.
Okay.
How much information and how much knowledge is being provided? Okay. And is it humorous or is it playful? So these are the kinds of tones that we need to look for. We need to be aware of it. This is very sort of watered down, very, very simple. And when we go through some examples in the study unit themselves, and I also give some examples of my own, you will start to see what we mean by logical. Is it rational? Is it objective? Is it informative? Is it passionate, emotional, humorous, playful? So this, what you see on the screen at the moment is a screenshot of a PDF I found, which goes into quite a lot of detail. You see there's a column for description, example, and how this persuades. Okay, I've given you the link up here, but I will also put it into the main tutorials, so that you can go and get it yourself. I went through it. It's quite informative, quite detailed, and it actually breaks the idea of the persuasive text down into small chunks which are accessible, especially because they give you examples of how certain techniques are used, okay, which is really, really helpful. So for example, alliteration, okay, we've gone through alliteration before, we know what it is. It's a repetition of, is it a vowel or a consonant? Which one? Okay, so, and when you're not sure about this, here's a trick for you. Okay, alliteration, A-L-L, okay, assonance, the emphasis is on the vowels. Okay, so assonance, vowels, alliteration, consonants. Okay, you remove, you know you don't need to have memorized which letters of the alphabet are the consonants. Just memorize which of the letters of the alphabet are the vowels. There are 5 of them. Okay, so here the example is a back-breaking job. Okay, first of all, the repetition is in the sound B, back-breaking. Provides emphasis on that. It also happens to be an image of a threatening body. Okay, our backs are breaking under the strain. Okay, so it's suggestive of more than just alliteration here. But for now, we're looking at alliteration. So it's a repetition of the consonant sound B, okay, which adds emphasis and reinforces meaning. Okay, and in this way it creates a highly emotive image. Okay, because when you close your eyes, and not only do you have an image of a back breaking, okay, but you have that b, it's that hard emphasis sound. Okay, so go through this PDF, download it, print it, add it to your hopefully growing repertoire of information. Repertoire is the wrong word, sorry. Collection of information that is related to this course and the texts. Okay, it is very helpful. Okay, so this you'll see when you go through the persuasive text unit. Okay, now don't freak out. All right. Remember, we've been focusing on the what, the why, and the how for 2 weeks now. What, why, how has been drilled into you, should be drilled into you. You should understand that when we're talking about what we are asking, what is the text about, what is the text, okay, identify the text, and what is the text about, explain what the text essentially is about, okay. Why is the text being written, and how has the text been written to create meaning? Okay, so we said last week that we look at what and why in the introduction, okay, and the how should be the body of the essay, and it should explain the what and the why and provide some sort of argument. Okay, so when we look at the actual study unit, you will find, okay, that it provides a little bit more than just the simple what, why, how. So what I want you to do is just to keep your mind, your head on straight, okay? I want you to keep this what, why, how as the central structure of analyzing any type of text that we do in this course. Then, okay, with that in mind, when you come to news reports, okay, you'll see that it gives you a basic description on page 20. It gives you a basic description of what news reports are, and it indicates that you should go to your prescribed textbook and you should look at chapters 1 and 9 just to sort of help you along, okay? And that will give you a bit of additional information and should also provide practice questions which you can start working on yourself. Then what, okay, we have our basic what kind of text is this? Now, here it explains to us that newspaper articles provide information on newsworthy topics and current events. All right. So immediately, news reports are from newspaper articles. They can sometimes be from magazines. It really depends. And you will be able to generally identify that when they give you where the text is from. So if it's from the Sunday Star, it's a newspaper. If they give you a text from Drum Magazine, then you need to identify it as a magazine article, not a news report. So we look at newspaper articles, what kind of text it is. Then it actually asks you, it doesn't ask you why, okay, it asks you how. How does the text use language? Okay. And only after, okay, or after how, it actually goes to who. Who is this text aimed at? Okay. And then it asks why. Now, there's a reason why they structured it like this, okay? It's just sort of to get you thinking about what kind of text it is. Is it? Well, how do newspapers use language? Okay, so that's why it's structured like this, okay? The how will still actually go in the body of the essay, okay? Who? Now, we will get to this in a lot of detail when it comes to prose fiction, but it is actually relevant here. Who is the text aimed at? What that means is that, remember what I said, they sort of, they try to connect with their audience. Marketing people try to connect with their audience. So they will use people who look like the target audience. They will use people who speak like the target audience. They will generally try and mimic or copy or create an association. So an advert which is directed at perhaps a American regarding food is going to be different to the advert directed at a South African regarding food. Okay, we have different cultural contexts, we have different languages, we have different ideologies which will impact on that, but we will be able to identify, okay, who the target audience generally is. Sometimes, especially in news reports, you will see that The target audience is based on the country that the news report is written in, okay? But that also again becomes tricky, because if you are given a news report taken from an online medium, that means that there is a certain level of international access to the news report, rather than one which is taken directly from a newspaper. Newspapers generally tend to be local, and then on what level of local are we talking about? Are we talking about municipal level? Okay. Are we talking about a newspaper perhaps for a certain area? Or is it a national newspaper? Okay, so when you think about who the target audience is, sorry, you need to think about where they're located and how the how the news or how the persuasive text is being distributed as well. Okay. If you're looking at perhaps a magazine article, you need to ask yourself, well, who generally buys that magazine? Okay. Is it a magazine article from perhaps a TV magazine? Okay. Or is it a magazine article from National Geographics? The consumer market for both of those magazines are different. Okay, sometimes you'll get a crossover. Sometimes a person who reads the TV magazine will happily read the National Geographic and vice versa. Sometimes they won't. Okay. So who is it aimed at is very important as well, because it will give us an idea of what kind of ideologies are being presented and are being asked to be accepted. Okay, because ideologies are something which can be sort of imposed or presented to someone, and then they can accept those ideologies, usually unconscious. It's usually something that we're not really aware of. Okay, so for example, you have a television advert with and they are selling the latest BMW. Okay, and this really glitzy glamoury car rolls up to the edge of the pavement, the door opens, and all you see is a sort of a low cut with woman's legs in stiletto high heels who climbs out. Okay, and all you see is those very expensive stiletto heels walking down a red carpet. Okay, and then perhaps you have the BMW logo. It's selling the product using means which objectify and sexualize women. Okay, stiletto heels are often associated with sexy women. Okay, so it's using essentially sex to sell the car. So that's one way. Okay, and if you buy into that ad, which is actually saying that if you have a BMW, you're either going to be that sexy woman, or you're going to get that sexy woman to drive in the car with you. Okay, it is again selling that ideology that this is, first of all, what you should look like, second of all, what you should drive in order to look like this, or in order to get a woman who looks like this. Okay, so that's what I mean about ideologies and selling ideologies along with the product. And that also will be linked to who. If you know that your target market is going to get offended with that kind of imagery, you're going to present a completely different advert to sell the BMW. Then you have the why is this. Okay, why is it being written? Is it to sell something? Is it to inform someone about something? Okay, so those kinds of whys are also presented. Okay, so when you are writing your assignment / exam question, I still want you to focus on the what, why, how. But don't forget that within your actual study unit, they have an emphasis on the ideas of the who. Okay, and they try and link the what and the how. Okay, but remember the how is already in our essays linked to the what and the why, because we need to explain those items. We need to be able to say, well, how do we know that this is a non-fiction newspaper text? Well, we know that because there is a headline and there is a lead, and it is it is a non-fictional text informing us about the next general election. Okay, and the political parties which are nominating their presidential electorates. Okay, so things like that. Then we have advertisements. Okay, and similar to that, the how, the who, the why. Okay, if you become familiar just with these notions of how, who, why, you won't get so sort of flabbergasted when you are asked to put it into an essay which again has the structure of what, why, how. Okay, don't get confused. I know it's slightly confusing, but just always keep in mind that what, why, how is our basic means of breaking down items. Okay, so getting back to this. Advertisements, they are intended to sell something. Normally they are intended to sell a consumer product. Sometimes you will find that there are political adverts, adverts which are engaging in social issues. So those adverts are trying to sell us certain ideas, certain concepts. Okay. Newspapers, they generally provide information on topics and events which are important to society. Please do remember that they can be biased and sometimes extremely biased. Sometimes you don't notice the bias at all. Speeches. In my 3 years of doing this course, I have not yet seen a speech in an exam situation. That doesn't mean that it can't happen. Speeches actually are one of the wonderful ways in which to test persuasive writing, because speeches are inherently created to persuade us and inform us on something, and usually people who are giving speeches are there giving speeches trying to convince us to buy into their ideas. And it's a wonderful form, because generally you'll find that speeches are partly prepared, partly not prepared. They'll veer off the prepared text, and it's emotive and engaging on a level that I find advertisements and news reports and magazine articles aren't. Okay, and then of course magazine articles, as I've said, you can put it into newspaper. I've just put it here because sometimes it can be a mixture between a report and an advert. Okay, so for example, okay, what is this text? It is a advert. Okay, if we look at it, we can see that it is a photo someone has obviously taken of either a bus or a tram. It's some kind of public transport system. And what the advertisers have done is they have placed the advert on the back of the chair. Okay. And so that when you sit down on the chair, the images of the hands behind someone's back tied, you can see that the arm is bruised, you can see that there's bruising and actual what looks like sort of tearing on the wrists through abrasions of the rope. So obviously someone has tried to escape, tried to loosen their bonds, have not been able to. Okay, and the phrase here says victims are people just like you and me. Okay, so what is this text? It is a non-fiction advertisement. What is the text about? It is about, what do you think the text is about? We've got a person who's been tied up, hands behind their back. This is a text which is directed at more than likely a European population, but the text is in English, so you'd probably say that it is either an American, an English, or an Australian/New Zealand text. Why? Because the predominant language is English in those ones. I say that I exclude South Africa because, well, first of all, I've never seen an advert like that here. Our buses and public transport don't have seats like that. So I'm automatically sort of whittling down who I think this text is directed at. Okay. My instinct is, when I look at this text, I think it's a advert creating awareness about human trafficking. Okay, which is a big issue across the world, but there is a large problem with human trafficking in Europe at the moment. Always has been, really. And it's trying to connect emotionally with me. First of all, because I'm sitting on the chair. In front of me is a chair which has an image of someone whose hands have been tied behind their back. I don't know if that same image is on my chair, okay, but it creates an association of my hands being bound and me being that person who is bound and sold, okay. And it goes further than that. It goes, victims are people just like you and me. So it's a humanitarian appeal. It's trying to get us to acknowledge on an emotional level, on a communal level, that this kind of action is not just unacceptable, but abhorrent and horrific. And the pain of the risks and the struggle that the individual has clearly gone through is something that we should all sort of identify with. Okay, so what is the text about? The text is about human trafficking. Alright. When I look at who is the text directed to, why is the text being produced, obviously it's a text that is the why is that it's being produced to combat through propaganda sort of human trafficking, to build awareness of human trafficking, and to build a empathetic, sympathetic, aware individual who will perhaps begin to engage in these issues. Okay. Another one. What is this text? It is a newspaper. Okay. So non-fiction newspaper. What is the text about? Well, we need to read it in its entirety. All right. But we can see from the heading and from the lead, shut it down. Students call for the decolonization of education, end to outsourcing. Okay, so we can, considering it's been a huge topic since about sort of mid last year, going on to the end of the year, and especially if you try to register early on in this year, you would have noticed it through UNISA. But it's a campus-wide, university-wide issues that students are asking for outsourcing of staff members to end. They're asking for a wider sort of more continental approach to education. So we can say that, what is this text? Okay, it's a newspaper article written in Cape Argus, because we can see that Friday, October 23rd, 2015, so we know when it was, and it's a special edition. So we can put these things in the what is this text about. Plus we also can see who the author is. Then what is the text about? It is about students who are protesting against the they're protesting for the certain rights that they believe should be fundamental in terms of what they are allowed to be taught, and also the end of outsourcing, really. Okay. Now this, if you see, there's a link to YouTube. This is a very famous speech, or an excerpt, should I say, of a very famous speech by Martin Luther King Jr. in 1963. The speech is titled "I Have a Dream." Okay, you can go to YouTube and watch the entire text, the entire recording of it. It is, for me, one of the most iconic speeches of all time. So when we just read this excerpt: "Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood." Okay, now this speech was presented at the height of the Civil Rights Movement in America, where African Americans were fighting to gain the same civil liberties that their white counterparts were automatically given. And Martin Luther King is the most iconic and probably the most influential civil rights movement leader of that era. So this is obviously part of a speech. Okay, the text is about freedom, about equality, but also about acceptance. Okay, Martin Luther King was all about being equal, being brothers. It's a dream, it's an ideal notion which he believed was achievable, and which really is achievable. So these kinds of things you need to look at in terms of the what. Okay. Another one, which I got from a magazine. Okay, just to give you an example of a magazine article. So this is why I say it can really be put under the news article, because it is so similar. But when you have a magazine article, generally the layout will be important. Oftentimes there won't be a picture for a newspaper article. You'll need to be able to identify the basics like the heading and the lead, but that will be really it in terms of visual structure. Magazines play up things. They use color, they use texture, they use photographs, they use images. They place the actual text in certain positions to draw the reader's eye to certain texts. Okay, so yeah. So when you're busy looking at magazines and stuff like that, just be aware of that. You need to be able to look at it not just from a content point of view, but also from a layout point of view. So what is this text? It's a magazine text. What is it about? Well, it's really about fashion, and in particular one individual. And her sort of hopes and aspirations for fashion. I chose this one just to give you a sense of what it means, of what we mean by ideology. The idea of a Miss South Africa, Miss Universe, Miss World, they all present a very structured and accepted idea of what it is to be beautiful. While there are differences in terms of what the women look like, there's almost always the same height, body structure. There's a similarity in terms of facial features. There's a similarity in terms of how these women have done their hair, have done their makeup. And when they produce these kinds of magazine articles, what they're asking us to do is to buy into that idea of beauty, that this uniformed, global, universal beauty is the standard of beauty, which of course is not true at all. There are many different kinds of beauty, and a lot of them can be culturally specific, but a lot of them can also be individually specific. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why I put this here. Okay, so why is the text written? The ideology behind the text. I've given you a definition of ideology: a system of ideas and ideals, especially ones which form the basis of economic or political theory and policy. Generally, ideologies are ideas and concepts and ideals which have been accepted by a group of people, okay? And then those ideas, ideals, concepts, notions are then marketed towards other people, and they will then buy into those ideas, ideals, etc. Okay. So it's to convince us something, it's to make us buy into something, it's to make us, if we go back to the first advert, it's to make us aware of the human trafficking, to make us identify with those people, to make us empathize with them, perhaps to get us angry, perhaps to get us motivated. If we look at the newspaper article, it's to engage with us, to inform us that this is what's going on in our country at the moment. Again, to perhaps make us sympathetic to the cause, to make us identify to the cause, to sell us certain ideas. Okay. How? We will get to house in the specific text, okay, in terms of newspaper, speech, magazine, visual, the advertisements. But for now, this is just a sort of a very, very basic gloss over. When you look at an advertisement, they are both visually and textually aware. In fact, if you notice the first advert, very little of it is text. Majority of the advert is visual. Okay, that's because we engage a lot quicker with visual appeal than with lots of writing. In fact, imagine if instead of having that advert with just the hands bowed and that one phrase, I had an entire essay written and posted to the back of the chair, which would be more engaging to you? Would you be more interested in the image, or would you spend the entire bus ride reading my essay, which I've posted to the back of the chair? And which one would be more effective at the end of the day? An image can say more than an essay can in some instances. Okay, so the layout, color, texture, the type, I mean, is it a billboard? Is it a advert in a magazine? Is it an advert on the television? There are different varieties of adverts. Okay, so that's what I meant by type. And then words used, tone, style, diction, figurative language. There was very little language used there, but what was used, the tone was emotive. It used the words you and me and they. It's creating an association between those who are victimized and you and I. And it's asking us to become part of that. Okay. Newspapers. Again, text I put in front of visual because it's the text which is going to matter the most here, the content, rather than the visual. But you can have a photo or an image in a visual text. Okay. Or in a newspaper report. And again, with magazine article, both visual and the text needs to be looked at. Speeches, because of the way we work, you will never be given a YouTube video. So the speeches that we will have access to will only be the written texts. So you won't have any visual input to speak about. Your analysis will be fully based on the words used, style, tone, diction, figurative language, content, etc. Okay, so hopefully that sort of just covers the general basics of it. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay, but before I go, I've emphasized this before, I want to emphasize this again. Has the text been persuasive? When you're writing your essay / assignment / exam / whatever, you need to formulate an argument. That argument can be as basic as, I looked at the advert that you provided, or that was provided to me, and I felt that it wasn't really all that persuasive. It was the context wasn't relatable to me at all, so I couldn't grasp the emotional effect that they were trying to portray. It was too alien for my social and political and ideological context. Or perhaps, yes, it was exceedingly persuasive. I identified with everything that they said. I agreed with what they said. The emotional impact of the image was strong, and this is why, etc., etc. Okay, so that is what you need to always remember, especially with persuasive texts. Okay, so this is the only video that I'm going to actually give for this text. I might create an audio recording for the texts for each the adverts, speeches, etc. But I really don't think I need to. So I'm actually going to leave it up to you guys to let me know if you want me to create an audio voiceover for those posts, which I will post later on this week. But this is the major post. So if you have any questions, please ask them, not on the YouTube page, but in the tutorial where there is a topic for questions. Okay. Otherwise, thank you. and I will. You will see the next presentation next week. Okay. Bye bye.